So let me ask you guys right now, what are you actually selling in your facility? What's the actual product? Most coaches and facility owners are just saying something like, lessons or sessions, or we sell training for pitchers or hitters. And that's exactly the problem, guys, because lessons and sessions are not a business model. Those are services. And there is a massive difference between the two. Services trade time for money. A business model builds revenue that compounds and scales and is actually going to create wealth. You can see the difference there. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through kind of how we think about those things and how we think about offer design inside our business and what's going to make an offer worth building, worth pricing high, and worth raising that price over time. This is more than just some business facility guru telling you guys to adopt a membership model. Setting up offers like this really is the only reason that our facility has been able to turn our operation into a seven-figure machine. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Dave Bartek. I built and scaled a baseball training facility here in Atlanta, Georgia, from absolute zero to a 10,000 square foot facility that we're proud to say is doing seven figures and employing 12. I've helped several of my own employees go out and start their own facilities. And I've been working on this stuff now for about 10 years, guys. And I've traveled the road from a corporate career to coaching travel ball and now scaling a profitable training facility that I own. So when I'm talking about this stuff, this is not theory. This is what I've actually lived out. And now I help facility owners do the same thing, building real businesses with real profit and real revenue and real opportunity to build legitimate wealth in owning and operating a training facility. So let me kind of walk you through what I typically see in terms of an offer structure for most facilities out there. Usually, you've got an athlete that's going to book a session or a lesson, and we're going to charge them for 1 hour or a half hour, right? There's a certain amount of money traded for one session with that athlete. What most coaches assume here is that whatever the dollar figure is for this hour of time, they assume that they can just adjust that up or adjust that down to figure out how to adjust their business model. Wrong. Problem with this is there is no commitment. There's no program of any sort that the athlete is following. And worse yet, there's no predictable revenue. On the owner's side, on your side, every single week, you're starting from zero with this. And you're waiting for your schedule to get busy and you don't really know who's coming in or who's not coming in. And worse yet, you really don't know what you're going to make. You're kind of just filling up your calendar when you can instead of running a business that you can truly operate the numbers up and down. And I would hope by now that most serious facility owners kind of know that this is not the best way. And in some cases, it may be the easiest way to collect some cheap money real quick. It may be a downsell, but it's not going to run a profitable business for you guys. The session model is the hardest way to run a facility long term if this is your main offer. And what most coaches don't realize is that there's another way. You don't just have to do what everybody else does. And here's what this model is actually costing you. It's costing you predictability. It's costing you retention for your athletes. It's costing you pricing power, and it's costing you the ability to scale your operation. And every time you want to grow, you're just having to fill more sessions and fill your calendar, which means more of your time, more of your staff's time, and more chaos, and just more of you. I'll say this for any business person, forget baseball, but just any business at all knows that, the real goal is to make money. And the real goal is never to work more hours to have to do it. At least I don't think so. I've never heard that. And there's a better way to build all of this. And it kind of starts with understanding, what you're actually selling. And that was my initial question. What are you actually offering at your facility? Let's kind of shift away from this thought process mentally. Let's think about the difference between setting something up with individual sessions versus some sort of other model. You have the ability to just sell a session versus selling an outcome. And for us, we want to sell the outcome for the athlete. You know, what is the outcome? When they come train with us, what are they going to get? We don't like to just say, come train with us. That's this. Come train with us. Come do a session. You know, DM me whatever and come work with us. We like to tell the athlete exactly what they're going to get when they come train with us. There is a massive difference between come train with us versus here's what your athlete is going to become, or here's what you're going to become when you come work with us. It's detailed, it's precise, and it's going to make the athlete think that you're speaking directly to them because, let's be honest, you are. When we rebuilt our Velocity Max program here at Athletic, we had an outcome first approach. Our pitching operation was kind of going stale at the time, and not really because our coaching wasn't good or there weren't any athletes. We still had guys. We just weren't laying out our best version of a long-term development program. So we rebuilt this thing, and we said to ourselves, okay, we're not selling pitching lessons here. We're not selling, a cage time. We're selling high-level velocity development specific to pitchers with a measurable result that any pitcher and their family will actually want and will actually pay for. And the name itself of that program kind of tells the athlete what they're getting. Velocity Max. There's no ambiguity here. There's no come train and see what happens next. There's a promise in the name, and we slapped a guarantee on that offer. And when your offer has a clear outcome kind of baked into it, the athlete knows what they're buying, the parent knows what they're paying for, and you know exactly how to deliver that product now. That clarity is what kind of allows you to charge more over time because you're not selling hours. You're selling an outcome. You're selling a result. And we've since replicated the same process for our hitting program. We've done the same with our strength program. And we ask ourselves, what does a hitter want? Barrels, hard contact, more barrels, more complete offensive players. So, those names are going to become the outcome. Think about your own programs. Does your offer name suggest something to someone to what they're going to get? Or does it just kind of describe what you do, elite pitching? That's something to think about. How you name your products and how you market your products is going to set up how all this stuff works. So let's kind of talk about the structure a little bit now, because we actually took somewhat of a different approach to this. We decided not to go with some simple membership model that people just jump into, but we chose to do a little bit something different. That's kind of what I alluded to earlier, but we wanted to go the approach of giving the athlete what they need and when they need it. The what and the when are huge. Once you kind of have a clear outcome-driven offer, the next question is how do you package this whole thing up? And the model that we run with our programs and, our Velocity Max program specifically is a cohort model. And we have program cycles where athletes enroll for a certain period of time. They go through the program together as a group, and then they come out on the other side with real results. And here's why this process is so much better than kind of an open-ended session model or an ongoing membership model. First thing we want to do is create commitment for the athlete and for us. So when an athlete enrolls in, one of our seasons or cohorts, the one thing we can guarantee is they're not just dipping in and dipping out. They're in for that cycle, and that commitment kind of changes the dynamic between you, the coach, and the athlete, and between you and the parent. And they're bought in, and bought-in athletes get better results. There's no rush to training. There's no pressure. You know how long you have that athlete. So if the goal is for that athlete to gain 5 miles an hour on his fastball and you've got them to commit for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever the commitment is, you know that you just have to hold up your end of the bargain to that athlete. And if you get them to buy into the commitment piece, it makes it easier on everyone. The next piece that we kind of figured out as we were setting all this stuff up with the cohort way of doing this is, this whole process creates a community. And there's something that happens when a young group of athletes is going through one of these outcome driven programs together. They push each other, they hold each other accountable. That community kind of starts to become part of the value, and it's a value you can't really put a price on because it's not something that a solo session can replicate. The third part to this, and this is kind of part of the business piece, is that this all starts to create, like we said earlier, predictable revenue. When you have athletes enrolled in these type of cycles, the great part is you know exactly what you have coming in. You can staff properly. You can project forward to what your revenue is going to be. You know what you've collected, what's contracted, and you can make true business decisions instead of just reacting to, whoever books a session this week. And this cohort model turns your facility from kind of a booking calendar into an actual business, and that's not a small thing. Here's the part that people kind of worry about with this. What if athletes don't commit to the full cycle? What do I do then? They don't want to commit to my 3-month program, or they don't want to commit to my annual program. Here's what I'll tell you. The athletes who don't want to commit to what you're offering are usually the ones that aren't serious enough to get the results anyway. And they're certainly not going to be able to keep lessons on the book doing it this way for any length of time. So what's really the worry? This commitment piece right here becomes a filter, and it keeps your program full of athletes who are actually going to do the work so that they get the better results, which means better testimonials for you, which means, you can charge more for the next upcoming cycle, and this stuff all connects. And this is if you really want to build a serious training facility, and this process works. Here's where this gets kind of interesting from a business model standpoint, because one offer set up like this is great, right? And you can imagine if you've got 4 seasons of this set up, you may be running this, in the spring, you may run it in the summer, you may run it in the fall, you may run it in the winter, and you can say, okay, cool, I'm doing a great job with this, and I can times it by 4. That's just with one offer. A stack of great offers that work together, now that's a real business. So the question is, how do we do that? In our business, like I said, we kind of started with the Velocity program first on the pitching side with this, and we also have our All Barrels hitting program for our hitters. We have a full strength and performance team here as well. We've built in strength training to both of our skilled programs, because what we know is middle school and high school and college baseball players need to be training in the gym in order to get better at the skilled part of the game. So let's think about what this actually means for when an athlete comes in the door, or when an athlete responds to an ad, or however you pull in your athletes. Let's think about what that means for the single athlete. And let's just say a pitcher is coming in and he's interested in your pitching program. I'm going to draw this out for kind of the way we've got this set up. All right, so you've got a pitcher interested in doing our Velo program. Okay, we know that a lot of pitchers in middle school and high school, sometimes beyond, they also hit. Okay, so that's the first question is, okay, are you a pitcher only, or do you also hit? Are you a two-way player? The next question we ask is what you're trying to get out of this whole thing. So you can obviously go through the goals for either one of these, and what it's going to lead to is typically I need to throw harder, I need to hit the ball harder, I need to get stronger. All of these things that are metrically driven in our game now, 60 times, all this kind of stuff. And once you start digging into some of that, what you'll realize is anybody who's coming in to do any sort of skilled work in your operation, in your facility, they're going to need strength training as well. And if you set up your conversations and your sales process and everything to make it so that you are prepared to present this properly to each athlete, you're no longer offering just one thing to an athlete anymore. You're taking whatever that athlete came in and was interested in, and you're slapping a few other things that you know are going to fit in very well. In our facility, we don't offer this program without this. We don't offer this program without this. We have several athletes who train in all three of our programs. But here's the beauty in this. Let's say you've priced these programs right here, these skilled programs that involve another component to it. And let's say you've priced each one at $2,000. And our price is actually a little bit higher than this right now, but this is kind of a good starting point to make sure that you understand it. And let's say that you value this piece at $1,000. Okay, well, we know that, hey, when we're slapping this $2,000 price tag on our pitching program or our hitting program, you can let that athlete know, hey, this includes a full strength and conditioning program. This includes programming. It's integrated. However you want to, project that to them. Some people are going to balk when you tell them the price. And the beauty in this is you now know their goals and what they're after. And that's part of the whole process. You have to be able to do that first. And if you know that you can successfully downsell them to maybe a piece of this and still give them part of what they want, that becomes an option instead of just selling a single lesson or a one-on-one lesson. That's where people are going to try to fight you. The best part about this, though, is that in building this out and setting this up in our own facility, what we found is that a lot of athletes over time, if they're committed to your process, they'll see the reason to train in multiple programs. And when you have guys that are enrolling in multiple programs and you're driving that cost up, the lifetime value for each athlete inside your facility just starts to multiply. And the connection to that community deepens, and the likelihood of athletes leaving drops dramatically. And a well-stacked offer structure doesn't just increase your revenue, but it's going to increase how hard it is for people to leave. If they leave when they're in multiple programs, they're not just leaving one thing, they're leaving a few different things. So I want to be clear about this. Don't get overwhelmed and think that you need to start with 3 or 4 or 5 different programs. You need to start with one great offer that has legitimate outcome-based results tied to it. But as you build that and as you prove your results and as you start to understand your athletes better, you'll start to see the gaps and where you can add and close some of that stuff, and areas where you can serve additional athletes with additional programs, and kind of that offer stack will start to grow with your business. It's a little bit dangerous to try to grow this too quick before you've actually built it. But we've got athletes in our building who have been training with us now for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, some of our college guys, and the lifetime values attached to some of those guys are $35,000, $40,000. And there's no way to actually achieve lifetime values that high just pricing everything by the hour in single sessions. That would take a lot of sessions to be able to accumulate that. These offer stacks is what makes that type of lifetime value for a client possible. So let's talk a little bit about pricing here. And this is where we kind of get jacked up and we leave some money on the table because it's a difficult conversation and the markets matter and where you're at and where you're starting. When we launched our first version of this type of offer, Velocity Max, we were not even close to the price that we're at now. We started with a price that felt right for us. We built the program, we built the results, we built the value, we figured out what worked, and then we started to raise the prices. I think we ran that program twice before we raised the price. Then the next cohort, we raised it again, and then we raised it again. And we sat there for about another year, and then we raised it again. And guess what? We're going to raise that price again. Because here's the thing about, pricing. The pricing should reflect, what the value is that you're delivering. And if your results are getting better and your program is growing in strength and it's getting tighter and your reputation's getting stronger and people know who you are, well, don't you think your price should move up with that? Your pricing is kind of a signal to where you're at. And a low price is going to tell the market that you don't fully believe in what you're delivering. A high price on the other end is going to suggest that, man, these people are the real deal. They get real results. So the question I get asked all the time is, you know, what am I going to lose if I raise my prices too high too fast? And, you know, the answer to that is you might lose some guys if you raise it too fast and you're not ready yet. But what happens is if you start to raise prices to a program that's actually delivering results, then the athletes who leave are probably the ones you wanted to fall off. Not that you ever want any athletes to fall off, but the type of athletes that are going to not be full in with the commitment, and they're not going to be, you know, in line with laying out this whole process, and they're not going to get results because they're not committed. Those are the ones you probably want to go away anyway before they become a problem. And when some of those guys go away, the athletes who stay, they become even more committed to the process because now they're invested at a higher level. The new guys who are coming into the program, they're pre-qualified, and you know that higher price is going to kind of filter out some of the people who are not serious. And serious families are going to produce serious athletes. Serious athletes get the results, and results justify the price every single time, guys. Trust me, we go through this. And that's kind of the cycle, and that cycle will build upon itself if you just let it, if you set it up properly and commit to it. This is kind of the last piece here, and it's probably the most important piece to this, right? Because a great offer is not just priced right, but it's defensible. And what I mean by this is it's built on something that a competitor can't just go out and copy, right? Somebody watching this video is not going to be able to just copy this and implement exactly what we've done. For us, the results are a big piece of that. The track record, the athletes who have come through our Velocity Max program and added 8 to 10 miles an hour velocity, the pitcher who committed to play at the next level, the kids who got scholarships, and the ones who eventually signed pro contracts later. Those things are not something that a new facility can just, you know, replicate by, you know, printing out, you know, a flyer of what you do and saying, hey, we're going to do this. The culture around this becomes defensible too, because that's what you work so hard to build in these good offers is the culture. And when athletes feel like they're kind of part of something, part of a real program with real peers and, you know, coaches who actually know them, this offer becomes, you know, more than just training to them. It becomes the place where they belong. It becomes home. And, you know, you can't compete with that belonging. You know, build the results, build the culture, and then price it accordingly. That's kind of our approach to this whole thing and the formula for offers that actually last and bring you more and more value every year. A lot of facilities and a lot of coaches are sitting on way more value than they even know, than they're even charging for. You know, the coaches have real skills, they've got experience and systems and results, but, you know, maybe all this stuff is packaged in a way that, you know, doesn't let any of that show. The structure's not set up properly, you know, in the sessions and the packages and the hourly lessons, you know, that commoditizes your work and they make you kind of look like everybody else, every other facility. And when you look like every other facility, you're really going to compete on price. And that's a race you're never going to win because we don't want to be lowering prices. We want to be increasing them. And outcome driven programs like this set up in cohort cycles, that's going to let you start leading your market in a direction. If you guys are watching this and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I get it, but I don't really know what this looks like in, you know, my situation, that's exactly the conversation I have with facility owners day to day. You know, we look at their current offers and how their offers are priced and their structure, and we build versions of this that fit into their business model. If that's something you guys are interested in, there's a link below. There's a calendar. Grab a time. Let's book a call and let's talk through some of this stuff together to figure out kind of how this will actually work inside of your business. You guys like, comment, subscribe if this was helpful. Drop a comment below. Tell me kind of how your facility is structured and some of the things that you're working on. I put videos out like this weekly for facility owners so that we can just talk through some of the same issues that I know everybody around the country is going through. I'll see you guys on the next one.